Okay, looks like we're at the top of the hour, so I think I'll kick us off, Patty, as people slowly trickle in. How does that sound?
Great.
Great. All right. Well, hi, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to our Conversation Project Community Call. I hope you all are all having a great week. My name is Christy Cronin, and I will be your WebEx host today. While we're waiting for everyone to join us, I'd like to run through a few WebEx tips and tricks. If you can hear my voice right now, you have connected successfully. If you would like to change your audio preferences, please click the Audio and Video tab at the top of your screen and click Switch Audio. You can also find this by clicking the Mute Unmute button at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question or comment at any point during the call, feel free to type it into the chat box. The way to do that is by selecting the chat bubble that is at the bottom of your screen. Once you click on this, the chat box will pop up. To send a public message, write your message at the bottom of the screen and send it to everyone. You can also use the raise your hand icon, which is located on the right-hand side of the chat, and we'll call on you to voice your question. If you're having any technical difficulties, please chat to host and I will help you with those one-on-one. We're going to take a moment to get things started in the chat. Type into the chat box your name, location, organization, and type of organization, whether that be faith, healthcare, community, government, volunteer, etc. Make sure to send your message to everyone. Great, well, feel free to continue using the chat as we move along. And with that, I'll turn things over to Patty Webster, advisor to the Conversation Project. Take it away, Patty.
All right. Thank you so much, Chrissy. And hello, good morning, early morning for some, afternoon for others, and for me it's evening. So I'm excited that we've got some folks in the line. We have a small group so far. We might have more people coming, and this is going to be recorded for others to watch. So I'm excited to share a little bit about what we're learning, but mostly excited for our guests that are here today, and I'm going to introduce them in just a minute. So let me just, I'm going to do a few little bits of housekeeping, and thank you, Cheryl, for popping in your hello and your name there. If folks are still working on popping their name in there, go ahead and use chat. I am very casual. This hour is a casual hour. I'm going to stop and pause and make sure we connect with anybody who's on the line as well. And so just know that you can use the chat and it won't bother me while I'm talking. So just for a few little bits of housekeeping, some of you may know this already, but coming up in January, we have been working on our new guides. And so our conversation starter kits were in need of a refresh. Some of you on the line have been helping us with that, and we've been greatly appreciative. And so these new kits, our aim is to ensure that these are more inclusive and available and accessible for everybody. So we are finishing up those kit refreshing, this whole project that we're working on, and those are going to be coming in January. So just to keep an eye on that. For now, what we're going to have is English, Spanish, and Chinese translations of those kits. We will still have our old kits in the other languages, but I wanted to give you all a heads up that just for now, we're just going to have those 3 languages translated. If you're using the kits in other languages in your community, because you've got community members that speak other various languages, you may want to see if there's some volunteers in your community that could potentially translate that. We are putting out a call for volunteers. If there's anybody who's willing to do some translations for us, please send them my way. That would be great. And along with those kits, we've got some other resources that we're going to be releasing over the new year. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that on our next call in December and release those in January. Okay. So, and just one other reminder, there's an event. If you all are on our Facebook Champions group, if you're not, I'll give you the link for that at the end of the call. But I'd share this on the group. There is an event that's happening next week that's being co-hosted by Kate DeBartola, who leads our work at the Conversation Project, with Michael Hebb and Tembi Locke, are co-hosting an event called The Endless Table and talking about recipes, loss, legacy, and holiday grief. There's going to be a whole host of really fantastic folks that are going to be sharing on this call. So if you've got some time, that's next week on the 23rd, and it is at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time. So just invite you all to join that call. Okay, so I'm just taking a peek at who's here. Excited to see some familiar faces. Hello to Amanda and Ronnie, Pat, Jen, Cheryl, Lynn. I'm excited that you all are here with us today. And so we're going to spend the next hour, 55 minutes or so, on stories. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of framing before we get to really the reason you're here is to hear from our two guests. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've learned and what we're hearing through some messaging research that's kind of corroborating a little bit about what we know. And I know a lot of you really base your work in stories. I'll do a little bit of that framing, and then we're really going to jump into learning from Hope Young and Mary Spencer Dockery, who are here with us today, and I'll do some proper introductions in a little bit with them. They're going to share a little bit about how and why they leverage stories in the work that they do. We'll open it up for some Q&A, and I encourage you, as Hope and Mary share a bit about their work, if you've got questions, ideas, thoughts as they're talking, go ahead and use that chat function and pop it in the chat. Since it's a nice small group today, we will make sure that we have an opportunity to get yourself off of mute and contribute as well. And so I want to open this up and share what you're learning, share maybe the stories that you're using or how you're leveraging stories in your work. So we'll do a little bit of sharing later on in the call. And then I'm going to wrap up the call, just share a little bit about what's coming up and some new calls that are coming up. So I hope that sounds okay. How does that sound? You can chat that in. If there's anything else you want to address in the next hour, please just let me know. Okay, so we've been chit-chatting as the call began. You may have heard us. We like to just first connect before we get into content. And I was just sharing that we've just recently moved, my family and I. We are now located in Abu Dhabi, which is in the United Arab Emirates. And it's my first time living in the Middle East, and we are a foreign service family. So my husband works at the State Department, and every couple of years we get an opportunity to move. And what really excites me is at the beginning of our move is that we get to explore and really tap into the origin of the places that we live and the people who live here and who really make up this community. And one of my most exciting things to do is really get to learn. And so one of the first things that we did is we went to the presidential palace, which is in Abu Dhabi City. It's called Qasr al-Watan. And here in the palace, they invite the whole world in to really share and learn about Arabian culture, knowledge, and their inspiring journey. The city itself, the built city, is not so old, but their history and their story really is. We all know that the power of story and storytelling is nothing new. So when we went to this presidential palace, they have a room that's called the House of Knowledge. And I just love that. And so we went into this room, masks on, no one else was around. They limit people in here. So we know that COVID is a huge issue. I want to recognize that for everybody because I know everyone's going through a lot right now. When we went into this House of Knowledge, in this section lies a story of a famous book. And I have it up here. The book is called 1001 Nights. You all may be familiar with this. It's also known as Arabian Nights. And it's a book of stories. It's one of the most famous collections of Middle Eastern folk tales that were compiled during the Islamic Golden Age. I had heard about this. I haven't read it. I don't know if any of you have read this or read some of the stories in here, but there are 1001 stories in this book. I know some of the stories. So Aladdin, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, these are some of the stories that my kids knew when they were younger. And so one of the most famous, as this is a really famous collection of stories, It's also known as one of the greatest contributions that the Arab, Middle Eastern, and Islamic world has made to world literature, because this book really shows and tells about the power of storytelling. The main frame, so the story, the main frame, which is the main story that it starts off with, is a story about King Shahryar and his last wife, Shahrazad. Hopefully I'm pronouncing the names correctly. So as I learned, when I was sitting there in this house of knowledge learning about this, I haven't read the stories, but what I learned is that before marrying Shahrazadi, so Shahrazadi is the last wife, we learned that King Shahryar was previously shocked to learn that his first wife, the very first wife he had, had numerous infidelities to him. And so he has her killed. And so in his fury, he vows he's going to have another wife, but he does not want his wife to have any infidelities as his first wife does. So the next wife he marries, to ensure that his next wife cannot dishonor him, the night after their wedding, he has her killed as well. And so it goes. He continues to marry, and he continues to have his wife killed the day after. So soon we learn that in town there is a woman called Shahrazadi, who is known as a great storyteller. And at this point, she actually volunteers to become the next wife of the king, knowing the brutalities and of his evil doings. Her family is very nervous, but she's not worried at all. And so on the night of their marriage, Shahrazadi begins to tell the king a tale, but she doesn't end the tale. She stops before it ends. The king, curious about how the tale ends, is forced to postpone her execution because he really wants to hear how the story ends. So the next night, she tells the ending of the story, but she starts another story in return. And so, again, the king is intrigued but wants to hear the end of the story. So he's eager for that conclusion, so he spares her life once again. The next night, she does the same, and every night after, she finishes one story and starts to tell the other. And so this goes on and on for 1,001 nights. Hence the name of the book. This was all new learning for me, and I loved learning about this. And as the narrator, so the narrator of this journey in the story is Shahrazadi. She tells her husband, the king, stories in hopes of amusing him, but also for saving her own life. And what I loved about this is I read about this history, and they had a quote that basically sums up the learning from this, and I love this. The quote is, "Telling a story comes to symbolize life, while the absence of a narrative symbolizes death." And as I read that, I thought, oh, how fitting, because I knew this call was coming up, how fitting to our topic and the work that we do about stories. And so we know that the storytelling and the power has been around for decades. It's been in various cultures, in various religions, and we're going to hear a lot about stories today from our two guests. So a little bit about what we have seen in the work that we do and how we've seen at the Conversation Project stories work. And so, at the very beginning of our origin, the TCP origin, the reason we were here is because of stories. So Ellen Goodman founded the Conversation Project. And if you know the story of the Conversation Project, it was founded because of her experience that she went through with her mom at end of life. She sat down with her friends and her colleagues and shared this story, and everyone had a short story to tell. And through those stories, the Conversation Project began, and they formed our work. So the power of those stories continued, and as we developed our conversation starter kits, the starter kits themselves really help people walk through their thoughts and helps them tell someone else the story of what matters to them through their own narrative. And so we purposely designed those kits to help people tell their story to somebody else. In the workshops that we host and the numerous workshops that you all are hosting that are on this call, we've seen some really phenomenal stories being shared. At the beginning of these workshops, I know when I do a workshop, I always start and I share the story of my mom and what we went through with her end-of-life experience. We have been privileged to listen to stories of pastors telling a story from the Bible to open up some of these workshops. We've heard political figures sharing the story of what happened with their father at the end of life. We have also heard from hospital CEOs open up and share the story, their personal journeys on why this matters to them. And so we see that power of the story. In those workshops as well, we ask people to turn and talk with each other. And people open up and start talking. Once people are invited in to share their story, they want to talk and talk with each other. And it's one of the hardest and most compelling parts of our sessions is that once people start talking, it's really hard to get them to stop. So we try to shut it down, but once people start, the energy in the room when stories are being shared is really palpable. And lately, we just did a recent call for blogs for folks to share their story. Because we recognize that this work is not about us, it's not about the Conversation Project, it's not about what we want. It's really about helping others and hearing from others in the community. And so using our platform to help others share stories is really important for us. The sheer volume of stories that were shared and submitted to us from all different race, cultures, backgrounds, faith, ethnicities was extremely heartwarming to us. And so we know that people are really interested and want to tell their story. And so we know that the power, and we're going to hear from a couple of folks today about that, just what we've heard in some research. And so we know in live sessions and in the work that we do, we know how powerful stories are. But even in research, one of the number one key messages that comes out and that we've heard through research that the John A. Hartford Foundation has funded, they've put together a wonderful group of organizations that we are really, we feel like it's a privilege to be part of this. Organizations that work on end of life, serious illness, palliative medicine, and hospice care. And through the research with these organizations, there's 6 key messaging principles that they've come up with. One of those number one key messaging principles is really encouraging folks to use stories. And not just any story, but really aspirational and positive stories really help people connect and be motivated for connecting with each other and motivating for that change. And so we encourage people to open up with their story and keeping it personal and not fearful. And so I'm going to the second point here is, I'll go over some of the other messages in case you're interested in that. But part of the messaging research talks about don't lead with death and dying. Don't focus on that negative impact, the gloom and doom. It's not to say we're brushing that under the story. Absolutely not. We want to address the elephant in the room. But as you lead some of the work that you're doing, focus on the positive and motivational and compelling to get people comfortable and build that trust in order to help talk about this topic that's hard for some people to talk about. One of the other messages is really speaking to we, and this is inclusive and encouraging accountability. Speaking and recognizing that we are all affected by death. We all have mortality that is out in front of us. COVID is really bringing that to the forefront. Focusing on our human connectedness together really helps people connecting while you're teaching this work. Emphasize caring, really focusing on messages of love and caring. And I know I've heard that from some of the work that's coming through Alameda County and Kokua Mau, who we're going to hear from next. And it really helps to talk about the benefits of conversations. So in conversations is two-way, talking and listening. And one of the last principles in this research is inviting dialogue. So not just once. This is, as you all know, the call to action is encouraging conversations. So inviting people in to talk and share is really what this is all about. So I hope that's helpful for just a little bit of framing and what we've seen in our work, but also in some of the research. But we're going to turn it now to really invite others to really share what they're doing. I'm going to end a little bit with a couple quotes. We see the power of stories in everything that we do. In pop culture, in music, musicians are storytellers. We know that. What I love about music is that you can sit and really hear stories behind the lyrics. Whether you're a fan of Miley Cyrus or not, I just loved this lyric in one of her songs. Death is life, it's not a curse. It reminds us of time and what it's worth. And so really what this is all about is that in the end, we all become stories. And I love that quote by Margaret Atwood. So without further ado, I'm going to see if there's anything over in chat, any comments, any questions. Let's do a little pause, see how everyone's doing. I'm going to then introduce our two guests today, and I'm just really excited that they are both spending time with us. Hope is coming from Hawaii, so she is here bright and early in the morning at 7 a.m. her time. Mary is coming from California, so she's also bright and early. So we're just excited that you're spending time with us. So I'm going to start with introducing Hope, and Hope's going to share a little bit with us, and then I'll move to Mary, and Mary will share some of what's happening in their work. And then we will open it up for you all for Q&A and discussion. So let me just introduce Hope and a little bit of background on Hope. She is the Advanced Care Coordinator for Kokua Mau. We've been working with them as fabulous champions in the field in Hawaii. Hope provides community awareness. She coordinates their Let's Talk Story program, which I love the title of that. It used to be their former Speakers Bureau. Hope joined Kokua Mau a couple years ago, back in 2017, and they are funded by the Stützke Foundation. She has her bachelor's degree in public administration, concentrating on healthcare administration. So her healthcare is in her blood and in her veins. But really, what I have seen from Hope is that she has worked in various capacities with seniors and caregiving community, and she has been such a wonderful storyteller in this work that she has been doing. I know that she is out in the community sharing stories and helping people with advanced care planning and normalizing the conversations to ensure that everyone's wishes are expressed. So Hope, I'm going to pass it to you to take it away for us.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Hope Young. I am the Advanced Care Planning Coordinator with Kokua Mau. Next slide. I can do it, yeah? There we go. So Kokua Mau, we are a nonprofit organization. We are a community benefit organization. We provide care, information and education throughout the state of Hawaii. We are supported by our members. Our members include health plans, hospitals, hospices, churches, senior living communities. We are supported by members who see the benefit in the work that we do in ensuring that people are heard. We also have passionate volunteers across the state, and I get to work with 16 volunteers. We call them our ambassadors. Our ambassadors include social workers, nurses, doctors. These people actually volunteer their time to go out into the community and talk about advanced care planning, talk about the conversation, because they've seen what happens when it doesn't get done well. They've seen fistfights in the ICU. They've seen the fighting amongst families, and they see the value in this work. Our three areas of activity are we work with people who may be facing serious illness and their loved ones to understand decisions that they may be forced to make, give them as much information as early as possible. We provide professional networking. We train the frontline workers to have these conversations. Oftentimes, these are difficult conversations to be had. We try to prepare them with tools so that when they're having these conversations, they're comfortable having it. And then we do a little bit of dabbling in legislation. We like to consider ourselves leading a movement, and our movement is to make advanced care planning and open communication just a social norm. We want it to be normal to have these conversations and not so scary. There was a time when people would talk about death without it being a scary thing. And we want to get back to that place so that we can talk about living well all the way up until the time of death. And that's really how I like to frame my presentations when I'm talking in the audience, is that I'm not talking about death, I'm talking about living well all the way up until the time of death. And when I frame it in that way, people actually take stock in what we're talking about. And how do we ensure that we're getting the best life possible? I love this proverb. Tell me the facts and I'll learn. Tell me the truth and I'll believe, but tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. I really like to use stories in my presentations because people connect with stories. Stories can evoke feelings and memories and emotions, and that can put the person in a sense of wanting to do something because of a story. They can create a connection with your audience, and that's really a hard thing, especially now when everything's virtual. Stories play a big part in these presentations. Prior to all this COVID madness, I was going out in the community and talking face-to-face with people, And that was really a means of connection, is being right there and hearing from them. Now that we've gone virtual for all our presentations, it's a little bit different. I find that I have to be a little bit more animated, and I have to really include the stories so that people can feel as if we're in the same room. Stories are really helpful because they make the conversation not so scary, right? People can relate to a story, and I like to use those stories to make it not so scary when we're talking about things. In my presentations, I like to talk about people I actually know. So in the middle, you'll see my mother. She passed away in 2017, but I use her through all of my sessions. Everyone who's heard any of my presentations has heard of my mother. That is one of my whys of why I enjoy this work, because I ensured that I was her champion until her death. I made sure that her voice was heard. And when I share her story, people can relate, because she went in and out to the ICU a few times before she finally died. And when she died, she was on hospice, and she was really comfortable knowing that we did everything that she wanted, and she was in charge. And I think that really gave her a sense of peace. And I'd like to include her story because she actually had Parkinson's, and her snowball effect happened when she couldn't swallow her pills, so she couldn't eat. So it snowballed into she got weak and she had a fall. But her story, which I like to share, is about the NG tube feeding. And she didn't want to extend her life, but she said she tried the tube feeding. So part of when I'm doing my sessions is I like to break it down and use simple terminology so people can understand. For tube feeding, I explain it in a temporary nasogastral tube feeding. They go up the nose, down the throat, and into the belly. And they did this for her a couple of times, and she just absolutely hated it. Said, get it out, it hurts. But I use that story as one of the examples of how our stories mean something to us, right? On the left, you see the two sisters. Her story comes in right after the conversation started. I shared this started with family. My good sister, her sister was a nurse, and she ran cancer, and the whole family just couldn't get along. So I had her sit down and do the starter kit as a family and share their answers, and not just focus on sister, but just really share their answers with each other. And she called me the next day and said that was the best 2-hour conversation that we had in the last 6 months. So I like to bring that one in because these are real people. The one on the right, the mother, the teacher with her son, we talk about palliative care with her. She is a teacher as well. Mom was a teacher. I find that sharing their stories is a means of their legacy. They wanted to educate children. We're educating the folks by using their legacy to share and make sure that people continue learning through their stories. There's one more story that I like to share, and it's one from Rosemary. She shared a story with us about Thanksgiving and having her parishioners, getting them all engaged in talking about end of life and having these conversations. And Rosemary shared the story with us that one of her parishioners came up to her and showed her an invitation for Thanksgiving dinner. And on the invitation, it said, there will be no pie until you tell me how you want to die. And I carry that story with me all the time. And especially now that it's close to Thanksgiving, it's a lovely way to make this conversation not so scary. Interjecting stories throughout my presentation has always been helpful because I'm relating with the audience and I'm sharing these people's legacies, their legacy, their story, and how they were able to come together to support each other through their health crisis, through their journey. So I encourage storytelling. I find it's a nice way to connect with the audience. I really see the joy when I'm in an in-person session when we're saying these stories. And like Patty was mentioning, when we break them out and they have them talk to each other, that's one of the hardest times to bring them back from that conversation when the room lights up and everybody gets energized about having these conversations, having them come back and talk with us. I think that's one of the easiest ways to get people primed for this conversation and make sure that people recognize that death is a human thing. I also really like to use humor. So one of my things is the last time I checked, the mortality rate is still at 100%. No one gets out of here alive, so why don't we talk about it? And I think really when we bring it down to the human level and recognizing that, hey, this is something we will all face. How about we make sure that we get it done the way that we want? I like to invoke words like champion when you're choosing your agent, when you're choosing your person, when you're choosing that advocate for you. That's your champion. That becomes your champion. And that word champion, it invokes something in me especially. But when I use that word out in the field, people like that thought. Hey, this is the person who's going to be my advocate when I need someone to speak for me. So I encourage you all to cultivate your stories, use people that you know. It just feels more intimate when you're sharing stories about people that you actually know and sharing their actual stories. I did ask my friends if I could use their pictures. I normally don't share their pictures, but I wanted you to see their faces because I'm not doing a presentation, but I wanted to let you know who these people are. And thank you for joining us. I really invite any questions about what we're doing out there. Thanks for having me, Patty.
Thank you so much, Hope. The use of pictures to me is so powerful as well. And I just love a lot of the things that you said just resonating with me. As you mentioned, people really connecting with stories. You talked about language used, and I think that's a great point on words that are used are important, such as champion and legacy, and thinking about your audience and what's going to really connect with them. I love these lessons that you shared. If folks have any questions, feel free to chat it in, raise your hand, and we'll take people off of mute later after Mary shares. But think about if there's anything you want to ask Hope. She is here for you and a fabulous champion to talk with. So thank you so much for sharing. And what I also really want to say is I just appreciate and thank you for sharing your story with your mom. I appreciate that you're able to share that with us. And that is really touching your heart and is what driving your passion. So thank you so much. Your mom is wonderful. So we're going to now move to Mary and her work in Alameda County. I'm excited for Mary to be here. Mary and I just met, but I am very familiar with the work that she and her wonderful colleagues have been doing for so long and for so many people. Mary Spencer Doherty is a registered nurse who has been working with the Alameda County Care Alliance for the past 4 years as their clinical advisor and care team supervisor. And before she was at ACCA, she was a public health nurse with the city of Berkeley for 8 years, which I was excited to read about that, Mary. My mom is a public health nurse too, so I just love that part of your story. Mary has over 31 years in nursing, so she is a well-seasoned expert, and we're excited to have her here. She has been working in so many different environments, from hospitals, correction facilities, nursing school supervisor, adolescent psychiatric nurse, you name it. Mary has been and supported so many different individuals across her 31 years. She's excited about helping others have a voice in advanced care planning. And so I'm going to pass this over to you, Mary.
Good morning and afternoon for some people. Yes, I am excited about this. And, I've been a nurse for a long time, and I never did my advanced care planning. And when I joined Alameda County Care Alliance, I saw how important it was and just the work that we do, that I actually had mine done as well as a result of that. So I'm going to talk about our program in the context of which we share our program and how we present our program by using storytelling and story listening. You go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So Alameda County Care Alliance Illness Program is a series of 8 to 12 meetings between a care navigator, that's our person, our champions or our care navigators, and the person needing care and caregivers. And it's over 6 months, and the visits are phone. They used to be visits, which, with the COVID-19 situation now, we do virtual and phone visits. What you see here is our focus of 5 cornerstones, and they represent a holistic approach to our care involving the mind, the body, the social, and the spiritual. The spiritual cornerstone, we can pray with them. There's support groups. church ministry recommendations, and you don't have to be church or spiritual, because what brings life, brings your life meaning is what we focus on with that cornerstone. And one of the navigators likes to say, it's whatever brings you joy. And then our health cornerstone is our empowerment cornerstone for the mind and the body, and the physical and the mental health. And we have like medication lists, and we also have a tool, this provider communication tool, that we help them to prepare for their doctor visit so that they can know what questions, because your doctor visits are only 15 minutes. And so we like to call that your 15 minutes of fame. So we help to prepare them for that. We also have our caregiving cornerstone, which helps to provide respite care for the caregiver and the families, and support groups as well. So we identify these needs for the cornerstones by our partnership through storytelling and listening. All the cornerstones don't have to apply to everyone. It's an individual situation. Can you go to the next slide, please? Our navigation and our navigators are thoroughly trained in engaging participants in storytelling. We listen and we assess to identify their needs, and we develop a personal AIC, or an advanced illness care program, which may or may not include all of the cornerstones. And the storytelling and listening helps to identify those needs. And we have shared goals between the participants, their empowerment. We have tools and training. We have referrals and resources to help with those needs. So storytelling helps to build rapport, and it also opens up what is meaningful to our participants. And the care navigators, they are trusted. Oh, the next slide, I'm sorry. The care navigators are trusted and well-respected individuals in the ACCA churches and in the community. They're not medical professionals, but they're trained to provide, they're not trained to provide clinical guidance, but they're trained to help to reach out to the people and help them, get them to open up so that we can determine what's going on. And in terms of helping them with advanced care planning, some of the navigators have their own personal videos that shares their stories with their families, and we share those stories also with our participants. The navigators almost always are able to form a trusting relationship with the participants, and through that, they're able to get them to open up to tell their story. And on 77% of the visits, we do goals for the participants. And one of the navigators is quoted as saying, "I see this program as an opportunity for the community to come together and uplift itself." Can you go to the next slide, please? So advanced care planning cornerstone focuses on introducing advanced care planning and activities to help the individuals think through their wishes and see if they're not able to speak for themselves, selecting a healthcare agent and documenting their wishes in an advanced care directive, and sharing their wishes with their friends and their families and their healthcare agent and clinician. So, and about 60% of our participants have completed an advanced care directive. And a lot of that success comes from building a trust through relationships and listening to the people tell their stories. And we have a series of visits, so we're able to work on the advanced care planning in segments, and spend time with them. And we found that being able to spend time with them helps them to get through that task of getting the advanced care directive done. And because the care navigators can take their time to help them to complete it. And then also the next slide, please. This is our care planning workbook, which is a workbook that we developed with the help of our leadership and our navigators and our pastors. And this workbook, we work with the participants to help them go through. Now, we meet them where they are. Sometimes they don't need the whole workbook, but it's set up with 3 different phases. It's the thinking, the planning, and the doing. And in the thinking phase, it helps them to think about their life and their wishes, and think about what makes life worth living, and think about how they would like to be remembered, So in the planning phase, that's where they make the choices, actually. They make the choices for what's best for them, and they talk about their choices with their families. We have done things where we've had family meetings with the whole family sharing in, where we're actually working with and training the whole family to do their advanced care directives. So it's a planning phase. It helps them to decide who they actually want to be their healthcare agent. And then the last phase is the doing phase, where they record their choices of care, and they actually write out the document. And this workbook, the last few pages of it is actually an advanced care directive, where they can complete it and have their witnesses, the two witnesses, witness them signing, and or have it notarized, either way. We also provide 3 other different types of directives. One, Kaiser has their own directive. A lot of our participants are Kaiser members. There's the California directive, which we use, and a lot of the churches, people from the churches, like the spiritual 5 wishes advanced directive. So this is helpful for them, and we can actually when we were visiting them, we had little tablets that we could show them our stories, our navigators who are sharing their stories, and this was helpful to get them to open up and tell their story. But storytelling is so important. I remember one of our participants. She had just lost her brother, and we asked her questions about what was it like, growing up with her brother. And she opened up and she shared so many beautiful stories about her brother and how he helped her out. He was her helper. And then as he grew sick and they were older, she became his helper. So it was just beautiful hearing some of the stories that they share and opening up about their situation and their lives and being able to see some of their strengths, that they have. Some of them have so many interesting stories to tell. And when they tell these stories, it helps us to see what resources that we have that we can identify to help them. Some of our resources for food and for housing and for just resources that we have checked out and we're able to supply this to them. So I just want to say thank you for letting me talk about our program. If you can go to the there's one more slide. Okay, this is our caregiver workbook. I almost forgot it. This is workbook for the caregivers, because our program helps people that need care, but we also help caregivers and families who are caring for those persons that need care. So this workbook, it has the beginning part, helps to identify what those needs are and how they can be helped. And then the second part, it kind of looks at the circle, the family of circle of members, and it helps to organize that and agencies that can help the caregiver. And the third part has to do with advocating with those different agencies, and we help to support them with that. And then the fourth part is actually for the caregiver. We have some tools that help them, because they can't really help anybody else if they need help themselves. So these tools help to support them and their activities to increase their sense of well-being. So thank you again for allowing me to help. And if you have any questions about our program and how we can help you, this is my phone number, 510-415-1251. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing stories, but also the power of the program that you're doing, not just for advanced care planning, but for holistic care, as you mentioned, for the whole person. And I really appreciate what really struck me as you shared was the intentionality that you all do for training for storytelling and story listening. I want to just make sure that if folks are on the line, we can open it up. If you've got questions, you're welcome to chat it in, but you're also welcome to just unmute yourself and ask questions, because it's a small group. And as you're doing, if anyone wants to chat in, go ahead. Thank you, Hope, for coming back up. Mary, I just love the fact that what you were saying kind of goes back to what Hope you were saying in that connectedness, is that as you all have been training in storytelling, story listening, it's that listening that really stands out, because we often talk about conversations and talking, but the listening part sometimes is absent. And I love that you were talking about how really listening to people's stories is helping you connect them with resources that might not be what people are thinking about. It might be food on the table. It might be getting housing. And I think that, I love that you shared that that's part of our work is really listening. And the ability for you all to really hone in and focus on that with your care navigators to make sure that they have those skills, I really love. The videos, that's another way of doing this and using the various platforms we have. So thank you for sharing that. Let me pause and thank you. And Mary, thank you again for being with us and sharing the work that is so powerful in your county, in your community. I'm going to see if anybody has any questions or comments. I know if you want to pop yourself off mute, you are welcome to join in and ask live rather than chat.
Hello, this is Lynn Betzold. I'm with Honoring Choices, and I just so appreciate the opportunity to be in such good company of storytellers. I do have a question, I guess, in terms of, it's really evident in what you've all said about storytelling, and it's always great to have a refresher about how it is used in general, and the art of and the significance. Given that storytelling can be so powerful, do you all have thoughts on how best to marry that message in and of itself with other areas that can help move that forward, even in terms of like policy or getting that message to some of the places that have the power to make some big changes? We see it so powerful in the individual work that we try to do. How do we harness that collective awareness in terms of really trying to get out the bigger message, the significance of why storytelling does matter, and can potentially change the course of policy, for instance. I know it's really a big question. It's just an ongoing struggle. So.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me ask Hope or Mary, do you have any thoughts on that?
We try to get those stories out there to the policymakers. We actually did a virtual conference earlier this year, trying to get palliative care in our community and trying to drum up that synergy so that people get excited about it. Because what we wanted to do is bring it from the grassroots up. So we intertwined stories of people who received palliative care and how that helped them. We intertwined that into the virtual session and it moved people. So I think it is important to continue using stories when we're approaching policy, when we're approaching legislators. They have their own stories, and if we could tap into their stories as well, that builds that personal connection to whatever we're trying to get accomplished. I really see the value in stories and learning other people's stories. Oftentimes we're finding out that that's why people do what they do, because of their story. Mm-hmm. So just tapping into those stories and hearing from them, I think it's a big thing that we need to probably do more of if we're trying to move that needle further upstream. I think it's a good idea to include stories.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just think that I agree with Hope, and I just think that I would like us to go as a program on a larger level to reach, more for stories. We haven't got there yet, but that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I think that Hope, that you're saying the platforms. So what are the various platforms that we can bring this to? I love hearing that you have that policy platform. There was a session probably about 2 weeks ago. It was a 2-series session through the National Academy of Sciences on advanced care planning. And they opened up that session with stories. Why Woods, who's one of Fabulous Champions, shared her story about her experiences. And so I think some of these sessions in some of these areas, and if you are tied to any organization or association, there's CTAC is a great, the Coalition for Transforming Advanced Care Planning. And CTAC is, I think I just butchered their name. That they are advancing policy, and so they are using stories. So if you are part of any local, state, or regional association, bringing this to them and tying stories to data. If the data is resonating with policymakers, you can kind of loop in the stories and the data together. And I think that what needs to happen, because sometimes it depends on what's resonating with that person or that group. But I think that's a really powerful question, Lynn, and that we need to ensure that the collective impact of stories is tied to results as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Patty, regarding the National Sciences. I was on that webinar as well, and I really was taken with that sense of what we're learning about the significance of and impact of storytelling, and how collectively there's a potential to pivot to say success can be measured in more than just the outcome of a directive, but certainly how can we begin to capture the success that we do achieve in storytelling, and how significant whatever level we get to in terms of the sharing progressively will make changes in people's lives. How do we capture that to not lose hope that we're making a difference? So yeah, this is just being in on this call is such a shot in the arm for just saying, yep, everybody's doing their part, and how do we continue to rally the troops around that?
I think it's also, Patty, I think it's also really important to recognize that how do we measure our work, right? It's really hard to measure the success of our work, but I think stories and hearing the success stories and how people are connecting, I think a big part of what we're doing is building the relationships so that they can have these conversations, and hearing the stories of success. Most of ours is anecdotal. I mean, it's really hard to say if we've moved the needle, but the more we hear that people are champions and getting what they want, I think it's a great means of measuring our success in the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I agree.
Totally agree with you, Hope. I'm going to say thank you so much for sharing that. I want to see, I'm just checking over here on chat. So Ronnie, hi Ronnie, who's on the line with us. Ronnie, do you want to share verbally? I see you shared on the chat, but I'm not sure if you can get off mute. If you can, yeah. Okay.
Can you hear me, Patty?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Okay. So what I've shared in the chat. First of all, let me say that I'm a widow of now 9 years, but having the conversation with my husband many years before, even before the conversation, because here's some humor, or what is subtle humor, is that I called myself a first-time, albeit menopausal bride, because we were married in our early 50s. It was my first marriage, for which I am very grateful, and never expected him to have a heart attack at the age of 61. So we had different kinds of conversations during our courtship and marriage about what we saw our life to look like. And fortunately, even before it was in vogue, we talked about, we had a conversation about what our future, not only retirement, but end of life would be like. And for that, I'm totally indebted. and to him for wanting to do that. So when it was time to, the doctor said they could do no more. He had a heart attack, 2 operations, and they finally said there was no more they could do. I knew not only on paper with our documents, but in my heart what he wanted and what I needed to do as his healthcare agent. And so what I put in the chat was I had forgotten until recently that I had done this podcast back in 2016. And the interviewer, who was a owner of a senior housing company that helps people find appropriate facilities, interviewed me, and his last question was something like, what's your final comment? And I don't know why, but out of my mouth it's the last 4 minutes of this 29-minute length I just talked about the conversation. I said, if you do nothing else, have the conversation. It goes into more detail. So I invite people to listen to it. I put the link in. It's also on. Patty was very kind and allowed and asked me to allow them to put it on their Facebook page. So the link is there. So it's really my it's another story. Let's put it that way. You guys were great. I want to say that. I learned a lot. I have a lot of notes. And but Patty had also asked me if I'd share this today in the link. So in the chat. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ron. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your story. I know you share, as Hope was talking, you talked about your mom. I know Ronnie does the same with her husband. And that really does provide that connection. So I thank you for sharing. And I'm looking at the clock, and I've got 3 minutes to get you guys all wound up and ready for the rest of your day. So I just want to thank Hope and Mary again for sharing with us. Lynn, thank you for your question and your input and insights, and you as well, Ronnie. For those that didn't get a chance to say anything off mute or unmute, please pop anything else in chat you want to share with us. And I'm just going to kind of take us through the rest of what's coming up next. So let me just share some other resources. If you want to learn a little bit more about what Mary is sharing with Alameda County, they have a video. We have the link here in the slide deck, and we can send that out post-call. A little bit more in depth, I think it's an hour-long conversation about their work, if you want a little bit more information on that. There is a really good bit of work that Marshall Gantz does around the power and the call to action that public narrative can bring. This is just a snippet from the work that he does that is really powerful, and I encourage you to just Google it if you haven't heard of it, but really talks about the connections between story of self, the story of us together, and influencing the story of now. IHI has a course, Leading and Organizing for Change, where they teach public narrative as part of that course. And it's just a really good resource for those who are wanting to dig a little bit more deeper into that. We have, speaking of stories, and Mary, you mentioned this about video sharing. Our conversation team has decided that we wanted to share our story, and it's always good to share the faces behind the people who do the work, right? And so we're pulling together a New Year's wishes video that we're going to release mid-December, so in a month's time. We're going to invite you all to do the same if you'd like to do this with us. So it's like a 2 or 3 minute video of our small team sharing these 2 questions. So why this work matters to us and what we're looking forward to in 2021. So we invite you all here to do the same and share this with your community and talk about, record yourself on video saying why this work matters to you, what you're looking forward to in 2021, and pop it on social media, and we are happy to post and repost and share this out. We kind of created this hashtag New Year, New Convo. One of our clever teammates popped this up, and so we just thought this was a fun way to just share the story. So we'll share our video and invite you all to do the same. What else do we have coming up? So here are our handles on social media. If you are on social media and don't know ours yet, please, we encourage you to, anything you have, you want us to spread the word, we are here for you guys. We'll retweet, reshare, whatever it's called. And we encourage you to follow along with us as well. Ron, you mentioned this. I know, Hope, you're on there, and a couple who are on the call are on this. We have a Facebook group that is for champions that you can join and discuss and talk. We're really encouraging people to learn from each other. The link is down on the bottom of the slide, so if you're not on there, we encourage you to join that Facebook group. One last minute here, and I'll wrap us up, I swear. We've got a map on our homepage. If you go to the Get Involved tab, there's a map, and it's growing. People are adding their PIN and sharing a little bit about what they're doing across the country. Tap into this and network with folks in your area who you want to learn from. This is a way to do that. We have our newsletters as well, as you all probably are familiar with, that you can learn more from us. Our next call in December, we're going to talk about a look ahead. 2020 has been quite the year for everybody. And we're going to talk about what's going on in 2021. So we hope you can join us and bring your plans for NHDB, which is going to be in April. We're going to see what this looks like. And then in January, we're going to have a call specifically around the new kits that are now going to be called guides that we're releasing, and some other materials that you can use to help go with that. So we hope you can join us for those calls. That is my spiel. Again, thank you for Hope and Mary and for our funders. The last thing, you'll be redirected for the small group that's on this call, and we appreciate you sticking with us. There's a survey that will pop up, that should pop up, and if you can just give 2 seconds to that to let us know what you thought and any topics you want us to address in 2021, we are here for you. And I know folks are Zoomed and webinared out, but we will have this as a recording, and we hope that you enjoyed today. So thank you again, everybody. And with that, I'm going to close us up. So thank you, guys. Thank you all so much for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thank you to Chrissy, who is our woman behind the scenes. She does so much for these calls. So thank you, Chrissy, so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Abby.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen, for all your help.
Of course, Mary. So nice to meet you both.
You too.
You too.
Okay.